All right, we are coming up on 8 o'clock. So, let's settle in, get comfortable, grab a drink and a book, and let's see what we have in store for us tonight. Welcome back. This is our second night reading Robert Cromie's The Crack of Doom. Last night, we started on our next entry in our unarchived series, Anne McCaffrey's Dragonflight. So that's something to look forward to next week, as our Saturday routine falls back into a comfortable rhythm. But tonight, we're back on our classics, and this is turn of the century, around 1900. Sci-fi, with all of the camp and quirks that go hand in hand and part and parcel with it. So, a little bit of a recap. Our intrepid protagonist, slash narrator, slash general fop, has been wandering around the world with more time and money than he really knows what to do with. And in his travels, he's come across a brother and sister pair who are intriguing. The brother is brilliant and absolutely captivating, but there's a dark undercurrent there. And on the flip side, the sister is captivating in an entirely different manner. A perfect specimen of the female form who has captivated our protagonist, and we'll see how that shakes out. Because as things have developed, he's followed his heart and joined a secret society from which there is no departing the society. They have apparently ways to just will people to death. And so if they decide that it's their time to leave the society, well, they'll be leaving the society of fellow man in general, such as the case may be. So, let's go ahead and see how this story will continue to develop as we see more and more devious developments and changes, and the plot carries on ever onward. So let's shift over into our reading nook, and let's see what we have ahead of us tonight. Chapter 8. The Woking Mystery. Oh, hey, Star. She knew all. Then she was a murderess, or in sympathy with murderers. My arms fell from her. I drew back, shuddering. I dared not look in her eyes, in her lying eyes, which cried pity, and her base heart knew no mercy. Surely now I had solved the maddening puzzle which the character of this girl had so far presented to me. Yet the true solution was as far from me as ever. Indeed, I could not well have been further from it than at that moment. Sometimes they just have to sing the song of their people. Or, in particular, it may just be aggravated yelling. That's all it really is, usually. Both of mine go through it in turns. As we walked back, Natalie made 2 or 3 unsuccessful attempts to lure me out of the silence, which was certainly more eloquent on my part than any words I could have used. Once she commenced, "It is hard to explain, I interrupted her harshly. No explanation is possible. On that, she put her handkerchief to her eyes, and a half-suppressed sob shook her slight figure. Her grief distracted me, but what could I say to assuage it? At the hall door I stopped and said, "Goodbye." Are you not coming in?" There was a directness and emphasis in the question which did not escape me. I? The horror in my own voice surprised myself, and assuredly did not pass without her notice. "Very well. Goodbye. We are not exactly slaves of convention here, but you are too far advanced in that direction even for me. This is your second startling departure from us. I trust you will spare me the humiliation entailed by the condescension of your further acquaintance." "Give me an hour!" I exclaimed aghast. "You do not make allowance for the enigma in which everything is wrapped up. I said I was your friend when I thought you of good report. Give me an hour, only an hour, to say whether I will stand by my promise. Now that you yourself have claimed that your report is not good but evil. For that, it is really what you have protested. Do I ask too much? Or is your generosity more limited than even my own?" "Oh, no, I would not have you think that. Take an hour, or a year. An hour only if you care for my happiness." "Agreed," said I. "I will take the hour. Discretion can have the year." So I left her. I could not go indoors. A roof would smother me. Give me the open lawns, leafy woods, the breath of the summer wind. Away, then, to the silence of the coming night. For an hour, leave me to my thoughts. Her unworthiness was now more than suspected. It was admitted. My misery was complete. I would not part with her. I could not. Innocent or guilty, she was mine. I must suffer with her or for her. The resolution by which I have abided was formed as I wandered lonely through the woods. When I reached my room that night, I found a note from Brand. To receive a letter from a man in whose house I was a guest did not surprise me. I was past that stage. There was nothing mysterious in the letter save its conclusion. It was simply an invitation to a public meeting of the society, which was to be held on that day week in the hall in Hanover Square. And the special feature in the letter, seeing that it did not vanish like the telegram, but remained an ordinary sheet of paper, lay in its concluding sentence. This urged me to allow nothing to prevent my attendance. "You will perhaps understand thereafter that we are neither political plotters nor lunatics, as you have thought." Thought? The man's mysterious power was becoming wearisome. It was too much for me. I wished that I had never seen his face. As I lay sleepless in my bed, I recommenced that interminable introspection which heretofore had been so barren of result. It was easy to swear to myself that I would stand by Natalie Brand, that I would never desert her, but how should my action be directed in order that by its conduct I might prevail upon the girl herself to surrender her evil associates? I knew that she regarded me with affection, and I knew also that she would not leave her brother for my sake. Did she sympathize with his nefarious schemes? Or was she decoyed into them like myself? Decoyed! That was it! I sprang from the bed, beside myself with delight. Now, I had not merely a loophole of escape from all these miseries. I had a royal highway. Fool, idiot, blind mole that I was, not to perceive sooner that easy solution of the problem. No wonder that she was wounded by my unworthy doubts, and she had tried to explain. But I would not listen. I threw myself back and commenced to weave all manner of pleasant fancies round the salvation of this girl from her brother's baneful influence, and the annihilation of his society, despite its occult powers, by mine own valor. The reaction was too great. Instead of constructing marvelous counterplots, I fell sound asleep. Next day, I found Natalie in a pleasant morning room to which I was directed. It didn't work then either, indeed. Next day, I found Natalie in a pleasant morning room to which I was directed. She wore her most extreme, and in consequence most exasperating, rational costume. Reminder that the rational costume that so unnerves our protagonist here, she's wearing pants. Oh, Lord Almighty, oh no! Clutcheth the pearls, she's wearing pants! When I entered the room, she pushed a chair towards me, in a way that suggested Miss Metford's worst manner, and lit a cigarette, for the express purpose, I felt, of annoying me. "I've come," I said somewhat shamefacedly, "to explain, and apologize." Yes, to apologize. I made a hideous mistake. I have suffered for it as much as you could wish. Wish you to suffer? She flung away her cigarette. Her dark eyes opened wide in unassumed surprise, and that curious light of pity, which I had so often wondered at, came into them. "I am very sorry if you have suffered," she said with convincing earnestness. "How could I doubt you? Senseless fool that I was to suppose for one moment that you approved of what you could not choose but know." At this, her face clouded. "I am afraid you are still in error. What opinion have you formed which alters your estimate of me?" "The only opinion possible, that you have unwillingly learned the secret of your brother's society, but, like myself, you see no way to what purpose? To destroy it." "I am not likely to attempt that." "No, it would be impossible, and the effort would cost your life." "That is not my reason." She arose and stood facing me. "I do not like to lose your esteem. You know already that I will not lie to retain it. I approve of the Society's purpose." "And its actions?" "They are inevitable. Therefore I approve also of its actions. I shall not ask you to remain now, for I see that you are again horrified, as is natural, considering your knowledge, or, pardon me for saying so, your want of knowledge." "What, Simba?" "Yes, hello." Okay, we're both getting it tonight, Akamas. "I shall be glad to see you after the lecture to which you are invited. You will know a little more then. Not all, perhaps, but enough to shake your time-dishonored theories of life and death." I bowed and left the room without a word. It was true, then, that she was mad like the others, and worse than mad, 1,000 times worse. I said farewell to Brand. As his guest, for the last time, thenceforward, I would meet him as an enemy. His secret enemy, so far as I could preserve my secrecy with such a man. His open enemy when the proper time should come. In the railway carriage, I turned over some letters and papers which I found in my pockets, not with deliberate intention, but to while away the time. One scrap startled me. It was the sheet on which Brand had written the Woking address. And on reading it over once more, a thought occurred to me, which I acted on as soon as possible. I could go to Woking and find out something about the man Delaney, so long as my inquiries were kept within the limits of the strictest discretion. Neither Brand nor any of his executive could blame me for seeking convincing evidence of the secret power they claimed. On my arrival in London, I drove immediately to the London Necropolis Company's station. Well, that's a company name, holy moly. And caught the funeral train which runs to Brookwood Cemetery. With St. Anne's Chapel as my base, I made short excursions hither and thither, and stood before a tombstone erected to the memory of George Delaney, late of the Criminal Investigation Department, Scotland Yard. This was a clue which I could follow up, so I hurried back to town and called on the superintendent of the department. Yes, I was told Delaney had belonged to the department. He had been a very successful officer in ferreting out foreign anarchists and evildoers. Reminder, 1895. Anarchists are the bad guys back then, and pretty commonly still are today in certain mainstream circles, but we try not to give those people the time of day. Where were we? His last movement was to join a society of harmless cranks who met in Hanover Square. Exactly. The median idiots are, unfortunately, the loudest voices. No importance was attached to this in the department. It could not have been done in the way of business. Although Delaney pretended that it was. He had dropped dead in the street as he was leaving his cab to enter the office, with information that must have appeared to him important. To judge from the cabman's evidence as to his intense excitement and repeated directions for faster driving, there was an inquest and a post-mortem. But death from natural causes was the verdict. That was all. It was enough for me. I had now sufficient evidence, and was finally convinced that the society was as dangerous as it was demented. All right. This is one of those very fun books where the page counter or the progress tracker is not accurate to the chapter breakout. So it says 33 pages left in chapter. Obviously, that's not the case when it was 34 pages left in the chapter at the end of the previous chapter. So we're flying by the seat of our pants here tonight, and we'll see how far we get. The chapter in this case might be like a part 1, part 2 sort of situation. Chapter 9. Cui Bono. When I arrived at the Society's rooms on the evening for which I had an invitation, I found them pleasantly lighted. The various scientific diagrams and instruments had been removed, and comfortable armchairs were arranged so that a free passage was available, not merely to each row, but to each chair. The place was full when I entered, and soon afterwards the door was closed and locked. Natalie Brand and Edith Metford were seated beside each other. An empty chair was on Miss Metford's right. She saw me standing at the door and nodded toward the empty seat, which she had reserved for me. When I reached it, she made a movement as if to forestall me and leave me the middle chair. I deprecated this by a look which was intentionally so severe that she described it later as a malignant scowl. I could not, at the moment, seat myself voluntarily beside Natalie Brand, with the exact and final knowledge which I had learned at Scotland Yard only 1 week old. I could not do it just then, although I did not mean to draw back from what I had undertaken, to stand by her, innocent or guilty. But I must have time to become accustomed to the sensation which followed this knowledge. Miss Medford's fugitive attempts at conversation pending the commencement of the lecture were disagreeable to me. There was a little stir on the platform. The chairman, in a few words, announced Herbert Brand. "This is the first public lecture," he said, "which has been given since the formation of the society, and in consequence of the fact that a number of people not scientifically educated are present, the lecturer will avoid the more esoteric phases of his subject, which would otherwise present themselves in his treatment of it, and confine himself to the commonplaces of scientific insight. The title of the lecture is identical with that of our society. Cui bono?" Brand came forward unostentatiously and placed a roll of paper on the reading desk. I have copied the extracts which follow from his manuscript. The whole essay, indeed, remains with me intact. It is too long, and it would be immaterial to reproduce it all in this narrative. I cannot hope either to reproduce the weird impressiveness of the lecturer's personality, his hold over his audience, or my own emotions in listening to this man whom I had proved, not only from his own confession, but by the strongest collateral evidence, to be a callous and relentless murderer. To hear him glide with sonorous voice and graceful gesture from point to point in his logical and terrible indictment of suffering, the futility of it, both in itself and that by which it was administered, no one could know Brand without finding interest, if not pleasure, in his many chance expressions full of curious and mysterious thought. I had often listened to his extemporaneous brain pictures, as the reader knows, but I had never before heard him deliberately formulate a planned-out system of thought. And such a system! This is the gospel according to Brand. "In the verbiage of primitive optimism, a misleading limitation is placed on the significance of the word nature and its inflections, and the misconception of the meaning of an important word is as certain to lead to an inaccurate concept as is the misstatement of a premise to precede a false conclusion. For instance, in the aphorism, variously rendered, 'What is natural right?' there is an excellent illustration of the misapplication of the word natural. If the saying means that what is natural is just and wise, it might as well run that what is natural is wrong. Injustice and unwisdom being as natural, i.e., a part of nature, as justice and wisdom. Morbidity and immorality are as natural as health and purity. Not more so, but not less so. That nature is made better by no mean but nature makes that mean is true enough. It is inevitably true. The question remains, in making that mean, has she really made anything that tends toward the final achievement of universal happiness? I say she has not. The misuse of a word, it may be argued, could not prove a serious obstacle to the growth of knowledge. It might be even interesting to the student of etymology. But behind the misuse of the word natural, there is a serious confusion of thought which must be clarified before the mass of human intelligence can achieve at a just appreciation of the verities which surround human existence, and explain it. To this end, it is necessary to get rid of the archaic idea of nature as a paternal, providential, and beneficent protector, a successor to the special providence, and to know the true nature, bond-slave as she is, of her own eternal persistence of force. That sole preliminary principle of which all other principles are only correlatives, of which the existence of matter is but a cognizable evidence. The optimist notion, therefore, that nature is an all-wise designer, in whose work order, system, wisdom, and beauty are prominent, does not fare well when placed under the microscope of scientific research. Order? There is no order in nature. Her armies are but seething mobs of rioters, destroying everything they can lay hands on. System? She has no system, unless it be a reductio ad absurdum, which only blunders on the right way after fruitlessly trying every other conceivable path. She is not wise. She never fills a pail, but she spills a hogshead. All her works are not beautiful. She never makes a masterpiece, but she smashes a million wasters without care. The theory of evolution, the gospel, reeks with ruffianism, nature patented and promoted. The whole scheme of the universe, all material existence as it is popularly known, is founded upon and begotten of a system of everlasting suffering as hideous as the fantastic nightmares of religious maniacs. The Spanish Inquisitors have been regarded as the most unnatural monsters who ever disgraced the history of mankind, yet the atrocities of the Inquisitors, like the battlefields of Napoleon and other heroes, were not only natural, but they have their prototypes. In every cubic inch of stagnant water or ounce of diseased tissue, and stagnant water is as natural as sterilized water, and diseased tissue is as natural as healthy tissue. Wholesale murder is nature's first law. She creates only to kill, and applies the rule as remorselessly to the units in a star drift as to the tadpoles in a horse pond. It seems a far cry from a star drift to a horse pond. It is so in distance and magnitude. It is not in the matter of constituents. In ultimate composition they are identical. The great nebula in Andromeda is an aggregation of atoms, and so is the river Thames. The only difference between them is the difference in the arrangement and incidence of these atoms, and in the molecular motion of which they are the first, but not the final cause. In a pint of Thames water, we know that there is bound up a latent force beside which steam and electricity are powerless in comparison. To release that force, it is only necessary to apply the sympathetic key. Just as the heated point of a needle will explode a mine of gunpowder and lay a city in ashes, that force is asleep. The atoms, which could give it reality, are at rest, or at least in a condition of quasi-rest. But in the stupendous mass of incandescent gas which constitutes the nebula of Andromeda, every atom is madly seeking rest and finding none, whirling in raging haste, battling with every other atom in its field of motion, impinging upon others and influencing them, being impinged upon and influenced by them. That awful cauldron exemplifies admirably the method of progress stimulated by suffering. It is the embryo of a new sun and his planets. After many million years of molecular agony, when his season of fission had come, he will rend huge fragments from his mass and hurl them helpless into space, there to grow into his satellites. In their turn, they may reproduce themselves in like manner before their true planetary life begins, in which they shall revolve around their parent as solid spheres. Follow them further, and learn how beneficent nature deals with them. After the lapse of time periods, which man may calculate in figures, but of which his finite mind cannot form even a true symbolic conception, the outer skin of the planet cools, rests. Internal troubles prevail for longer periods still, and these, in their unsupportable agony, bend and burst the solid strata overlying, vomit fire through their self-made blowholes, rear mountains from the depths of the sea, then dash them in pieces. Time strides on austere. The globe still cools, life appears upon it, then begins anew the old strife, but under conditions far more dreadful. For though it be founded on atomic consciousnesses, the central consciousness of the heterogeneous aggregation of atoms becomes immeasurably more sentient and susceptible with every step it takes from homogenesis. This internecine war must continue while any creature, great or small, shall remain alive upon the world that bore it. By slow degrees, the mighty milestones in the protoplasmic march are passed. Plants and animals are now busy murdering and devouring each other. The strong everywhere destroying the weak. New types appear, old types disappear. Types possessing the greatest capacity for murder progress most rapidly, and those with the least recede and determine. The Neolithic man succeeds the Paleolithic man, and sharpens the stone axe. Then, to increase their power for destruction, men find it better to hunt in packs. Communities appear. Soon each community discovers that its own advantage is furthered by confining its killing in the main to the members of neighboring communities. Nations early make the same discovery, and at last, as with ourselves, there is established a race with conscience enough to know that it is vile, and intelligence enough to know that it is insignificant. But what profits this? In the fullness of time, the race shall die. Men will go down into the pit, and all his thoughts will perish. The uneasy consciousness which, in this obscure corner, has for a brief space broken the silence of the universe, will be at rest. Matter will know itself no longer. Life and death and love, stronger than death, will be as though they never had been. Nor will anything that is be better or be worse for all that the labor, genius, devotion, and suffering of man have striven through countless generations to effect. The roaring loom of time weaves on. The globe cools out. Life mercifully ceases from upon its surface. The atmosphere and water disappear. It rests. It is dead. But for its vicarious service in influencing more youthful planets within its reach, that dead world might as well be loosed at once from its gravitation cable and be turned adrift into space. Its time has not yet come. It will not come until the great central sun of the system to which it belongs has passed laboriously through all his stages of stellar life and died out also. Then, when that dead sun, according to the impact theory, blunders across the path of another sun, dead and blind like himself, its time will come. The result of that impact will be a new star nebula, with all its weary history before it, a history of suffering, in which 1,000,000 years will not be long enough to write a single page. Here we have a scientific parallel to the hell of superstition which may account for the instinctive origin of the smoking flax and the fire which shall never be quenched. We know that the atoms of which the human body is built up are atoms of matter. It follows that every atom in every living body will be present in some form at that final impact, in which the solar system will be ended in a blazing whirlwind, which will melt the earth with its fervent heat. There is not a molecule or cell in any creature alive this day which will not, in its ultimate constituents, endure the long agony, lasting countless eons of centuries, wherein the solid mass of this great globe will be represented by a rush of incandescent gas, stupendous in itself, but trivial in comparison with the hurricane of flame in which it will be swallowed up and lost. And when, from that hell, a new star emerges, and new planets in their season are born of him, and he and they repeat, as they must repeat, the ceaseless, changeless, remorseless story of the universe, every atom in this earth will take its place, and fill again functions identical with those which it or its fellow fills now. Life will reappear, develop, determine, to be renewed again as before, and so on forever. Nature has known no rest. From the beginning, which never was, she has been building up only to tear down again. She has been fabricating pretty toys and trinkets that cost her many 1,000 years to forge, only to break them in pieces for her sport. With infinite painstaking she has manufactured man only to torture him with mean miseries in the embryonic stages of his life. of his race, and in his higher development to madden him with intellectual puzzles. Thus it will be unto the end, which never shall be, for there is neither beginning nor end to her unvarying cycles. Whether the secular optimist be successful or unsuccessful in realizing his paltry span of terrestrial paradise, whether the paeans he sings about it are prophetic, dithyrambs, or misleading myths, no Christian man need fear for his own immortality. That is well assured. In some form he will surely be raised from the dead. In some form he will live again, but cui bono? All right, that brings us to the end of Chapter 9. I had no idea that the abbreviated version of that speech was going to be that entire chapter. My man said he paraphrased for the benefit of the audience and the fact that it would fill the book. He was not joking. Holy moly. All right. Chapter 10. Force. A remedy. Get me out of this. I am stifled. Ill. Miss Metford said in a low voice to me. As we were hurrying from the room, Brand and his sister, who had joined him, met us. The fire had died out of his eyes. His voice had returned to its ordinary key. His demeanor was imperturbable, sphinx-like. I murmured some words about the eloquence of the lecture, but interrupted myself when I observed his complete indifference to my remarks, and said, "Neither praise nor blame seems to affect you, Brand." "Certainly not," he answered calmly. "You forget that there is nothing deserving of either praise or blame." Man is peak nihilism. I knew I could not argue with him, so we passed on. Outside, I offered to find a cab for Miss Metford, and to my surprise, she allowed me to do so. Her self-assertive manner was visibly modified. She made no pretense of resenting this slight attention, as was usual with her in similar cases. Indeed, she asked me to accompany her as far as our ways lay together, but I felt that my society at the time could hardly prove enlivening. I excused myself by saying candidly that I wished to be alone. My own company soon became unendurable. In despair, I turned into a music hall. The contrast between my mental excitement and the inanities of the stage was too acute. So this resource speedily failed me. Then I betook myself to the streets again. Here I remembered a letter Brand had put into my hand as I left the hall. It was short, and the tone was even more peremptory than his usual arrogance. It directed me to meet the members of the society at Charing Cross Station at 2 o'clock on the following day. No information was given, save that we were all going on a long journey, and I must set my affairs in such order that my absence would not cause any trouble. And the letter ended, "Our experiments are now complete. Our plans are matured. Do not fail to attend." "Fail to attend," I muttered. "If I am not the most abject coward on the earth, I will attend. With every available policeman in London." The pent-up wrath and impotence of many days found voice at last. "Yes, Brand," I shouted aloud, "I will attend, and you shall be sorry for having invited me." "But I will not be sorry," said Natalie Brand, touching my arm. "You here?" I exclaimed, in great surprise, for it was fully an hour since I had left the hall, and my movements had been at haphazard since then. "Yes, I have followed you for your own sake. Are you really going to draw back now?" "I must. Then I must go on alone. You will not go on alone. You will remain. Your friends shall go on without you. Go to prison without you, I mean. Poor boy, she said softly to herself. I wonder if I would have thought as I think now, if I had known him sooner. I suppose I should have been as other women, and their fool's paradise would have been mine, for a little while. The absolute hopelessness in her voice pierced my heart. I pleaded passionately with her to give up her brother and all the maniacs who followed him. For the time, I forgot utterly that the girl, by her own confession, was already with them in sympathy as well as in deed. She said to me, I cannot hold back now, and you know you are powerless to interfere. If you will not come with me, I must go alone. But you may remain. I have prevailed on Herbert and Gray to permit that. Never, I answered. Where you go, I go. It is not really necessary. In the end, it will make no difference. And remember, you still think me guilty. Even so, I am going with you. Guilty. Now, this seemed to me a very ordinary speech. For who would have held back thinking her innocent? But Natalie stopped suddenly, and looking me in the face, said, almost with a sob, Arthur, I sometimes wish I had known you sooner. I might have been different. She was silent for a moment. Then she said piteously to me, You will not fail me tomorrow? No, I will not fail you tomorrow, I answered. She pressed my hand gratefully and left me without any explanation as to her movements in the meantime. I hurried to my hotel to set my affairs in order before joining Brand's expedition. The time was short for this. Fortunately, there was not much to do. By midnight, I had my arrangements nearly complete. At the time, the greater part of my money was lying at call in a London bank. This I determined to draw in gold the next day. I also had at my banker's some scrip, and I knew I could raise money on that. My personal effects and the mementos of my travels, which lay about my rooms in great confusion, must remain where they were. As to the few friends who remained to me, I did not write to them. I could not well describe a project of which I knew nothing, save that it was being carried out by dangerous lunatics. Or, at least, by men who were dangerous. Whether their madness was real or assumed. Nor can I think of any reasonable excuse for leaving England after so long an absence without a personal visit to them. It was best, then, to disappear without a word. Having finished my dispositions, I changed my coat for a dressing gown and sat down by the window, which I threw open, for the summer night was warm. I sat long and did not leave my chair until the morning sun was shining on my face. When I got to Charing Cross the next day, a group of 50 or 60 people were standing apart from the general crowd and conversing with animation. Almost the whole strength of the society was assembled to see a few of us off, I thought. In fact, they were all going. About a dozen women were in the party, and they were dressed in the most extravagant, irrational costumes. Edith Metford was amongst them. I drew her aside and apologized for not having called to wish her farewell, but she stopped me. Oh, it's all right. I'm going too. Don't look so frightened. This was more than I could tolerate. She was far too good a girl to be allowed to walk blindfold into the pit I had digged for myself with full knowledge. I said imperatively, Miss Metford, you shall not go. I warned you more than once, and warned you, I firmly believe, at the risk of my life, against these people. You have disregarded the advice which it may yet cost me dear to have given you.
To tell you the truth, she said candidly, I would not go an inch if it were not for yourself. I can't trust you with them. You'd get into mischief. I don't mean with Natalie Brand, but the others. I don't like them. So, I'm coming to look after you.
Then I shall speak to Brand.
That would be useless. I joined the society this morning.
This, she said seriously, and without anything of the spirit of bravado, which was one of her faults. That ended our dispute. We exchanged a meaning look as our party took their seats. There was now, at any rate, one human being in the society to whom I could speak my mind. We traveled by special train. Our ultimate destination was a fishing village on the southern coast, near Brand's residence. Here we found a steam yacht of about 1,000 tons lying in the harbor with steam up. The vessel was a beautiful model. Her lines promised great speed, but the comfort of her passengers had been no less considered by her builder when he gave her so much beam and so high a freeboard. The ship's furniture was the finest I had ever seen, and I crossed every great ocean in the world. The library, especially, was more suggestive of a room in the British Museum than the batch of books usually carried at sea. But I have no mind to enter on a detailed description of a beautiful pleasure ship while my story waits. I only mention the general condition of the vessel, in evidence of the fact that, which now struck me for the first time, Brand must have unlimited money. His mode of life in London, and in the country notwithstanding his pleasant house, was in the simplest style. From the moment we entered his special train at Charing Cross, he flung money about him with wanton recklessness. As we made our way through the crowd, which was hanging against the quay, an unpleasant incident occurred. Miss Brand, with Halley and Rockingham, became separated from Miss Metford and myself, and went on in front of us. We five had formed a subsection of the main body, and were keeping to ourselves when the unavoidable separation took place. A slight scream in front caused Miss Metford and myself to hurry forward. We found the others surrounded by a gang of drunken sailors who had stopped them. A red-bearded giant, frenzied with drink, had seized Natalie in his arms. His abettor, a swarthy Italian, had drawn his knife and menaced Halley and Rockingham. The rest of the band looked on and cheered their chiefs. Halley was white to the lips. Rockingham was perfectly calm, or perhaps indifferent. He called for a policeman. Neither interfered. I did not blame Rockingham. He was a man of the world, so nothing manly could be expected of him. But Halley's cowardice disgusted me. I rushed forward and caught the Italian from behind. His knife was dangerous. Seizing him by the collar and waist, I swung him twice, and then flung him from me with all my strength. He spun round 2 or 3 times, and then collided with a stack of timber. His head struck a beam, and he fell in his tracks without a word. The red-haired giant instantly released Natalie and put up his hands. The man's attitude showed that he knew nothing of defense. I swept his guard aside and struck him violently on the neck, close to the ear. I was a trained boxer, but I had never before struck a blow in earnest, or in such earnest, and I hardly knew my own strength. The man went down with a grunt like a pole-axed ox, and lay where he fell. To a drunken sailor lad who seemed anxious to be included in this matter, I dealt a stinging smack on the face with my open hand that satisfied him straight away. The others did not molest me. Turning from the crowd, I found Edith Metford looking at me with blazing eyes. "Superb, Marcel! I am proud of you!" she cried. "Oh, Edith, how can you say that?" Natalie Brand exclaimed, still trembling. "Such dreadful violence! The poor men knew no better." "Poor fiddlesticks! It is well for you that Marcel is a man of violence. He's worth 12 sheep like—" "Like whom, Miss Metford?" Rockingham asked. glaring at her so viciously that I interposed with a hasty entreaty that all should hurry to the ship. I did not trust the man. Miss Bedford was not so easily suppressed. She laughed leisurely. I meant to say, like you, and this over-nervous but otherwise admirable boy. If you think sheep derogatory, pray make it goats. I hurried them on board. Brand welcomed us at the gangway. The vessel was his own, so he was as much at home on the ship as in his country house. I had an important letter to write, and very little time for the task. It was not finished a moment too soon. For the moment the last passenger and the last bale of luggage was on board, the captain's telegraph rang from the bridge, and the Esmeralda steamed out to sea. My letter, however, was safe on shore. The land was low down upon the horizon before the long summer twilight deepened slowly into night. Then, one by one, the shadowy cliffs grew dim, dark, and disappeared. We saw no more of England until after many days of gradually culminating horror. The very night, which was our first at sea, did not pass without a strange adventure, which happened, indeed, by an innocent oversight. All right, that brings us to the end of Chapter 10. And things are progressing apace. And it seems that there's a inevitability here. The society marches ever onward. The new members join in. The resistance is not really very effective, just kind of along for the ride. And the leaders definitely have some scheming and plotting going on behind the scenes. Natalie was the aversion to violence there as she was rescued from her assaulters was the little extra bit that she's probably not worth our protagonist's time. And once again, we are proven, no, you can't fix her. It doesn't matter how hot she is. You can't fix her. Alright guys, we've got ads starting in about... Well, we got some scheduled to start in about 2 minutes. So let's go ahead and take a short break. We'll let the ads run so that no one has to miss anything. And then we'll be back in just a little while to continue from Chapter 11 of The Crack of Doom. All right, we are back. All right, so let's continue with tonight's reading as we see the events that are on the ship now, and maybe we can divine some of the greater plan that this society, Guido, is putting together. What's in the works? So, Chapter 11, Morituri te saluto. We had been sitting on deck chairs smoking and talking for a couple of hours after the late dinner, which was served as soon as the vessel was well out to sea, when Brand came on deck. He was hailed with enthusiasm. This did not move him, or even interest him. I was careful not to join in the acclamations produced by his presence. He noticed this and lightly called me recalcitrant. I admitted the justice of the epithet and begged him to consider it one which would always apply to me with equal force. He laughed at this and contrasted my gloomy fears with the excellent arrangements which he had made for my comfort. I asked him what had become of Gray. I thought it strange that this man should be amongst the absentees. Oh, Gray, he goes to Labrador. To Labrador? What takes him to Labrador? The same purpose which takes us to the Arthur Sea, Brand answered, and passed on. Presently there was a slight stir amongst the people, and the word was passed round that Brand was about to undertake some interesting experiment for the amusement of his guests. I hurried aft along with some other men with whom I had been talking, and found Miss Brand and Miss Metford standing hand in hand. Natalie's face was very white, and the only time I ever saw real fear upon it was at that moment. I thought the incident on the quay had unnerved her more than was apparent at the time, and that she was still upset by it. She beckoned to me, and when I came to her, she seized my hand. She was trembling so much her words were hardly articulate. Miss Metford was concerned for her companion's nervousness, but otherwise indifferent, while Natalie stood holding her hands in hers like a frightened child, awaiting the firing of a cannon. "He's going to let off something, a rocket, I suppose," Miss Metford said to me. "Natalie seems to think he means to sink the ship." "He does not mean to do so. He might, if an accident occurred." "Is he going to fire a mine?" I asked. "No, he is going to etherize a drop of water." Natalie said this was so seriously. We had no thought of laughter, incongruous as the cause of her fears might seem. At that moment, Brand addressed us from the top of the deckhouse, and explained that in order to illustrate on a large scale the most recent discovery in natural science, he was about to disintegrate a drop of water, at present encased in a hollow glass ball about the size of a pea, which he held between his thumb and forefinger. An electric light was turned upon him so that we could all see the thing quite plainly. He explained that there was a division in the ball, one portion of it containing the drop of water, and the other the agent, by which, when the dividing wall was eaten through by its action, the atoms of the water would be resolved into the ultimate ether, of which they were composed. As the disintegrating agent was powerless in salt water, we might all feel assured that no great catastrophe would ensue. Before throwing the glass ball overboard, a careful search for the lights of ships was made from east to west and north to south. There was not a light to be seen anywhere. Brand threw the ball over the side. We were going under easy steam at the time, but the moment we left the deckhouse, "Full speed ahead!" was rung from the bridge, and the Esmeralda showed us her pace. She literally tore through the water when the engines got full on. Before we had gone 100 yards, a great cry arose. A little fleet of French fishing boats with no lights up had been lying very close to us on the starboard bow. There they were, boatfuls of men who waved careless adieus to us as we dashed past. Brand was silent for a moment. Then he shrugged his shoulders and muttered, "It can't be helped now." We all felt that these simple words might mean much. To test their full portent, I went over to him, Natalie still holding my hand with trembling fingers. "Can't you do anything for them?" I asked.
You mean, go back and sink this ship to keep them company?
No, but warn them to fly.
It would be useless. In this breeze they could not sail 100 yards in the time allowed, and 3 miles is the nearest point of safety. I cannot say definitely, as this is the first time I have ever tried an experiment so tremendous, but I believe that if we even slowed to half speed, it would be dangerous. And if we stopped, the Esmeralda would go to the bottom tonight, as certainly as the sun will rise tomorrow."
Natalie moaned in anguish on hearing this. I said to her sternly, "I thought you approved of all these actions." "This serves no purpose. These men may not even have a painless death, and the reality is more awful than I thought." Every face was turned to that point in the darkness toward which the foaming wake of the Esmeralda stretched back. Not a word more was spoken until Brand, who was standing watch in hand beside the light from the deck house, came aft and said,
"You will see the explosion in 10 seconds.
He could not have spoken more indifferently, if the catastrophe he had planned was only the firing of a penny squib. Then the sea behind us burst into flame, followed by the sound of an explosion so frightful that we were almost stunned by it. A huge mass of water, torn up in a solid block, was hurled into the air, and there it broke into 100 roaring cataracts. These, in the brilliant searchlight from the ship, which was now turned upon them full, fell like cataracts of liquid silver into the seething cauldron of water that raged below. The instant the explosion was over, our engines were reversed, and the Esmeralda went full speed astern. The waves were still rolling in tumultuous breakers when we got back. We might as well have gone on. The French fishing fleet had disappeared. I could not help saying to Brand before we turned in, "You expect us, I suppose, to believe that the explosion was really caused by a drop of water?"
"Etherized," he interrupted. "Certainly I do. You don't believe it. On what grounds?"
"That it is unbelievable."
"Pshaw! You deny a fact because you do not understand it. Ignorance is not evidence."
Okay, so, yes, the man is patently insane, but he's also spitting facts. I say it is impossible.
"You do not wish to believe it possible. Wishes are not proofs."
Without pursuing the argument, I said to him, "It is fortunate that the accident took place at sea. There will be no inquest."
"Oh, I am sorry for the accident. As for my men, they might have had a worse fate. As for the men, they might have had a worse fate. It is better than living in a lifelong misery as they do. Besides, both they and the fishes that will eat them will soon be numbered amongst the things that have been."
Chapter 12. No death, save in life. Well, before we go on. So, yeah, this was, we've mentioned it as we went through a few things, as we were alluding to this in the synopses that I've read on this. This was, we just saw, as far as anyone can tell, the first depiction of a nuclear blast in any fiction. The splitting of the atoms of well, all of the atoms of a drop of water, etherize it, as he put it, breaking into component pieces and releasing the energy therein. Yeah. Not too terribly far off, honestly. But if you could actually manage to have a clean nuclear blast like that, clean fission, just boop, no nuclear, no radiation, just pure energy. That'd be kind of swag, actually. But no. No death, save in life. For some days afterward, our voyage was uneventful, and the usual shipboard amusements were requisitioned to while away the tedious hours. The French fishing fleet was never mentioned. We got through the bay with very little knocking about, and passed the rock without calling. I was not disappointed, for there was slight inducement for going ashore, oppressed as I was with the ever-present incubus of dread. At intervals, this feeling became less acute, but only to return, strengthened by its short absences. After a time, my danger sense became blunted. The nervous system became torpid under continuous stress and refused to pass on the sensations with sufficient intensity to the brain. Or the wary brain was asleep at its post and did not heed the warnings. I could think no more. As this reminds me of something which I must tell you about young Hallie. For several days after the voyage began, the boy avoided me. I knew his reason for doing this. I myself did not blame him for his want of physical courage, but I was glad that he himself was ashamed of it. Hallie came to me one morning and said, I wish to speak to you, Marcel. I must speak to you. It is about that miserable episode on the evening we left England. I acted like a cad. Therefore, I must be a cad. I only want to tell you that I despise myself as much as you can, and that I envy you. I never thought that I should envy a man simply because he had no nervous system. Who is the man without a nervous system of whom you speak? I asked coldly. I was not sorry that I had an opportunity of reading him a lesson which might be placed opposite the many indignities which had been put upon me, in the form mainly of shoulder shrugs, brow elevations, and the like. You, of course, I mean no offense. You are magnificent. I'm sorry in saying that I admire you. I wish I was like you in height, weight, muscle, and absence of nervous system. You would keep your own brain, I suppose? I asked. Yes, I would keep that. And I will keep my own nervous system, I replied. And the difference between mine and yours is this, that whereas my own danger sense is, or was, as keen as your own, I have my reserve of nerve force, or had it, which might be relied on to tide me over a sudden emergency. This reserve you have expended on your brain. There are two kinds of cowards. The selfish coward who cares for no interest save his own. The unselfish coward who cares nothing for himself, but who cannot face a danger because he dare not. And there are two kinds of brave men. The nerveless man you spoke of, who simply faces danger because he does not appreciate it, and the man who faces danger because, although he fears it, he dares it. I have no difficulty in placing you in this list. You place me a coward because you cannot help it. You are merely out of harmony with your environment. You ought to bring a supply of environment about with you, seeing as you cannot manufacture it offhand like myself. I wish to be alone. Good day. Before I go, Marcel, I will say this. There were tears in his eyes.
These people do not really know you. With all their telepathic power, you are not...
Not a great fool as they think. Thank you. I mean to prove that to them someday. With that, I turned away from him, although I felt that he would have gladly stayed longer with me. While the Esmeralda was sweeping over the long swells of the Mediterranean, I heard Brand lecture for the second time. It was a fitting interlude between his first and third addresses. I might classify them thus. The first, critical. The second, constructive. The third, executive. His third speech was the last he made in the world. We were assembled in the saloon. It would have been pleasanter on the upper deck, owing to the heat, but the speaker could not then have been easily heard in the noise of the wind and waves. I could scarcely believe that it was Brand who arose to speak, so changed was his expression. The frank skepticism, which had only recently degenerated into a cynicism, still tempered with a half-kindly air of easy superiority, was gone. In its place, there was a look of concentrated and relentless purpose, which dominated the man himself and all who saw him. He began in forcible and direct sentences, with only a faintly reminiscent eloquence which was part of himself, and from which he could not, without a conscious effort, have freed his style. The whole bearing of the man had little trace in it of the dilettante academician. Why does that word every time it comes up? Academician, whom we all remembered.
When I last addressed this society, he began, I labored under a difficulty in arriving at ultimate truth, which was of my own manufacture. I presupposed, as you will remember, the indestructibility of the atom, and in logical consequence, I was bound to admit the conservation of suffering, the eternity of misery. But on that evening, many of my audience were untaught in the rudiments of ultimate thought, and some were still skeptical of the bona fides of our purpose, and our power to achieve its object. To them, in their then ineptitude, what I shall say now would have been unintelligible. For, in the same way that the waves of light or sound exceeding a certain maximum cannot be transferred to the brain by dull eyes and ears, my thought pulsations would have escaped those auditors by virtue of their own irresponsiveness. Tonight, I am free from the limitation which I then suffered, because there are none around me now who have not sufficient knowledge to grasp what I shall present. You remember that I traced for you the story of evolution in its journey from the atom to the star. I showed you that the hypothesis of the indestructibility of the atom was simply a creed of cruelty writ large. I now proceed on the lines of true science to show you how that hypothesis is false. That as the atom is destructible, as you have seen by our experiments, the last of which resulted in a climax not intended by me, the whole scheme of what is called creation falls to pieces. As the atom was the first etheric blunder, so the material universe is the grand etheric mistake. In considering the marvelous and miserable succession of errors resulting from the meretricious atomic remedy adopted by the ether to cure its local sores, it must first be said of the ether itself that there is too much of it. Space is not sufficient for it. Thus, the particles of ether, those imponderable entities which vibrate through a block of marble or a disc-hammered steel with only a dulled, not an annihilated motion, are by their own tumultuous plenty packed closer together than they wish. I say wish, for if all material consciousness and sentiency be founded on atomic consciousnesses, then in its turn atomic consciousness is founded upon and dependent on etheric consciousness. These particles of ether, therefore, when too closely impinge upon their neighbors, resent the impact, and in doing so initiate etheric whirlwinds, from whose vast protuberances stupendous drifts set out. In their gigantic power, these avalanches crush the particles which impede them, force the resisting medium out of its normal stage, destroy the homogeneity of its constituents, and mass them into individualistic communities whose vibrations play with greater freedom than when they synchronize. The homogeneous etheric tendencies recede, and finally determine. Behold, a miracle! An atom is born. By a similar process, which I may liken to that of putting off an evil day which sometime must be endured, the atoms group themselves into molecules. In their time, the molecules go forth to war, capturing or being captured, the vibrations of the slaves always being forced to synchronize with those of their conquerors. The nucleus of the gas of a primal metal is now complete, and the foundation of a solar system, paltry molecule of the universe as it is laid. Thereafter, the rest is easily followed. It is described in your school books, and must not occupy me now. But one word I will interpolate, which may serve to explain a curious and interesting human belief. You are aware of how, in times past, men of absolutely no scientific insight held firmly to the idea that an elixir of life and a philosopher's stone might be discovered, and that these two objects were nearly always pursued contemporaneously. That is, to my mind, an extraordinary example of the force of atomic consciousness. The idea itself was absolutely correct, but the men who followed it had slight knowledge of its unity, and none whatever of its proper pursuit. They would have worked on their special lines to eternity before advancing a single step toward their object, and this because they did not know what life was, and death was, and what the metals ultimately signified, which they, blind fools, so unsuccessfully tried to transmute. But we know more than they. We have climbed, no doubt, in the footholds they have carved, and we have gained the summit they only saw in the mirage of hope. For we know that there is no life, no death, no metals, no matter, no emotions, no thoughts, but that all that we call by these names is only to ether in various conditions. Life! I could live as long as this earth will submit to human existence if I had studied that paltry problem. Metals! The ship in which you sail was bought with gold manufactured in my crucibles. The unintelligent, or I should say the grossly ignorant, have long held over the heads of the pioneers of science these two great charges. No man has ever yet transmuted a metal. No man has ever yet proved the connecting link between organic and inorganic life. I say life, for I take it that this company admits that a slab of granite is as much alive as any man or woman I see before me. But I have manufactured gold. I could have manufactured protoplasm if I had devoted my life to that object. My studies have been almost wholly on the inorganic plane, hence the philosopher's stone came in my way, but not the elixir of life. The molecules of protoplasm are only a little more complex than the molecules of hydrogen, or nitrogen, or iron, or coal. You may fuse iron, vaporize water, intermix the gases, but the molecules of all change little in such metamorphosis. And you may slay 20,000 men at Waterloo or Sedan, or 10,000 generations may be numbered with the dust, and not an ounce of protoplasm lies dead. All molecules are merely arrangements of atoms, made under different degrees of pressure and of different ages. And all atoms are constructed of identical constituents. The ether, as I have said. Therefore, the ether, which was from the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, which is the same yesterday, today, and forever, is the origin of force, of matter, of life. It is alive! Its starry children are so many that the sands of the seashore may not be used as a similitude for their multitude, and they extend so far that distance may not be named in relation to them. They are so high above us and so deep below us that there is neither height nor depth in them. There is neither east nor west in them, nor north and south in them, nor is there beginning or end to them. Time drops his scythe and stands appalled before that dreadful host. Number applies not to its eternal multitudes. Distance is lost in boundless space, and from all the stars that stud the caverns of the universe, there swells this awful chorus: failure, failure and futility, and the ether is to blame. Heterogeneous suffering is more acute than homogeneous, because the agony is intensified by being localized. Because the comfort of the comfortable is purchasable only by the multiplied misery of the miserable. Because aristocratic leisure requires that the poor should always be with it. There is, therefore, no gladness without its overbalancing sorrow. There is no good without intenser evil. There is no death save in life. Back, then, from this ill balance and unfair long suffering, this insufficient existence, back to nirvana, the ether, and I will lead the way. The agent I will employ has cost me all life to discover. It will release the vast stores of etheric energy locked up in the huge atomic warehouse of this project, this planet. I shall remedy the grand mistake only to a degree which it would be preposterous to call even microscopic. But when I have done what I can, I am blameless for the rest. In due season, the whole blunder will be cured by the same means that I shall use, and all the hideous experiments will be over. Everlasting rest, or quasi-rest, will supersede the magnificent failure of material existence. This Earth, at least, and I am encouraged to hope the whole solar system will, by my instrumentality, be restored to the ether from which it never should have emerged. Once before, in the history of our system, an effort similar to mine was made, unhappily, without success. This time, we shall not fail.
A low murmur rose from the audience as the lecturer concluded, and a hushed whisper asked, "Where was that other effort made?" Brand faced round momentarily, and said, quietly but distinctly, "On the planet, which was where the asteroids are now." Dun dun dun. Alright, so that gets us to the end of chapter 12. And again, it was... he really is. He's really, like, JRPG last boss level of nihilism. Like, the very concept of existence must be ended by my hand and mine alone. I'm the special one. I can do it. Yeah. This is up there with going off to slay God of JRPG tier plot devices. It is interesting to see how the understanding of science at the time is twisted, because all sci-fi in the end becomes speculative sci-fi, usually, or else you're into full-on science fantasy like we saw with Barsoom. But this is firmly in the science fiction / speculative sci-fi realm, and it's interesting to see how the understanding of sciences at the turn of the century shaped what their imaginations of things could be. Atomic theory was really coming into its own, and the idea that there was energy locked up was starting to be an awareness. It was an impossibility at the time, but it captured the imagination. And but we're still seeing like Light is a wave being mentioned. We're seeing the constant mentions of the ether, as opposed to the more elementary particles, things like that. But it's all very close-ish. If you remember when we read Mysterious Island with Jules Verne, and we saw a lot of similar things like this when he was trying to wrap his head around the planet or the tectonics, and not really understanding or knowing that tectonics and the shifting of the continents was a thing, but still having some vague understanding that there's something going on with the plates of the Earth's crust. It's all very interesting whenever we get into science like this, because it's like, okay, yeah, you look at authors like Crichton, who are a more modern example of speculative sci-fi, and to us, those ideas sound very reasonable. But in 50 years, they'll probably sound just as absurd as these, I'm sure. There's a few of Crichton's who are already patently absurd, but that's neither here nor there. Some of his earlier works were a little silly. But it's all just close enough. Just barely. And that's, yeah, you're right. That's why sci-fi is so interesting and so valuable. It's a snapshot of the imagination of the people at the time. 40 years ago is not even scratching the surface, I think, because his very early stuff was even sooner than that, wasn't it? When was he's like the early bits, like Andromeda Strain and Sphere? $1969. Yeah. We feel old. Yeah, if you're aiming at popular stuff, you're thinking like Jurassic Park. Which, yeah, for sure. That's when he really took off. Yeah, I didn't realize he was writing in primarily in the 70s. That's crazy. That's crazy. I thought he was more recent. I know he passed relatively recently. Well, I say that, but it was like in the early 2000s, if I remember right. Time is an illusion. It can't hurt you. Oh, Eaters of the Dead. Yeah, that was a fun one. We read Beowulf, and so Eaters of the Dead was extra cool when you realize that it's basically just Crichton retelling Beowulf. All right, let's go ahead and continue. We've got about half an hour left tonight. We can get a fair bit further, at least through another chapter or two, I'm sure. So, chapter 13, Miss Metford's Plan. We coaled at Port Said, like any ordinary steamer. Although I had more than once made the Red Sea voyage, I had never before taken the slightest interest in the coaling of the vessel on which I was a passenger. At this time, everything was different. That which interested me before seemed trivial now, and that which had before seemed trivial was now absorbing. I watched the coaling, commonplace as the spectacle was, with vivid curiosity. The red lights, the sooty demons at work, every bag of coals they carried, and all the coal dust clouds they created, were fitting episodes in a voyage such as ours. We took an enormous quantity of coal on board. I remained up most of the night in a frame of mind which I thought none might envy. I myself would have made light of it had I known what was still in store for the Esmeralda and her company. It was nearly morning when I turned in. When I awoke, we were nearing the Red Sea. On deck, the conversation of our party was always eccentric. But this must be said for it. There was sometimes a scintillating brilliance in it that almost blinded one to its extreme absurdity. The show of high spirits, which was very general, was in the main unaffected. For the rest, it was plainly assumed. But those who assumed their parts did so with a histrionic power, which was all the more surprising when it is remembered that the origin of their excellent playing was centered in their own fears. I preserved a neutral attitude. I did not venture on any overt act of insubordination. That would have only meant my destruction, without any counterbalancing advantage in the way of balking an enterprise in which I was a most unwilling participator. And to pretend that what I did not feel was a task which I had neither stomach to undertake nor ability to carry out successfully in consequence, I kept my own counsel, and that of Edith Medford. Brand was the most easily approached maniac I had ever met. His affability continued absolutely consistent. I took advantage of this to say to him on a convenient opportunity, "Why did you bring these people with you? They must all be useless, and many of them little better than a nuisance." "Marcel, you are improving. Have you attained the telepathic power? You have read my mind." This was said with a pleasant smile. "I cannot read your mind," I answered. "I only diagnose." "Your diagnosis is correct. I answer you in a sentence. They are all sympathetic, and human sympathy is necessary to me until my purpose is fulfilled." "You do not look to me for any measure of this sympathy, I trust." "I do not. You are anti-sympathetic." And antipathetic. "I am. But necessary all the same." "So be it. Until the proper time shall come." "It will never come," Brand said firmly. "We shall see," I replied as firmly as himself. Okay, damn it, Akimos. Now, I can only think of Brand as like fucking Kefka, and I can't get that idea out of my mind. Damn it! Next evening, as we were steaming down the blue waters, deep blue they always seemed to me, of the Red Sea, I was sitting on the foredeck, smoking and trying to think. I did not notice how the time passed. What seemed to me an hour at most must have been 3 or 4. With the exception of the men of the crew who were on duty, I was alone. The heat was intense, and most of our people were lying in their cabins prostrated in spite of the wind sails which were spread from every port to catch the breeze. My meditations were just as gloomy. Were, as usual, gloomy and despondent. They were interrupted by Miss Medford. She joined me so noiselessly that I was not aware of her presence until she laid her hand on my arm. I started at her touch, but she whispered a sharp warning, so full of suppressed emotion that I instantly recovered a semblance of unconcern. The girl was very white and nervous. This contrast from her usual equanimity was disquieting. She clung to me hysterically as she gasped, "Marcel, it is a mercy I have found you alone, and that there is one sane man in this ship full of lunatics." "I am afraid you are not altogether right," I said, as I placed a seat for her close to mine. "I can hardly be sane when I am a voluntary passenger on board this vessel." "Do you really think they mean what they say?" she asked hurriedly, without noticing my remark. I really think that they have discovered the secret of extraordinary natural forces, so powerful and so terrible that no one can say what they may or may not accomplish. And that is the reason I begged you not to come on this voyage.
What was the good of asking me not to come without giving me some reason?
Had I done so, they might have killed you as they have done others before.
You might have chanced that, seeing that it will probably end that way.
And they would certainly have killed me.
Ah!
I wondered at the sudden intensity of the girl's sharp gasp when I said this, and marveled, too, how she, who had always been so mannish, nestled close to me, and allowed her head to sink down on my shoulder. I pitied the strong-willed, self-reliant nature which had given way under some strain of which I had yet to be told. So I stooped and touched her cheek with my lips in a friendly way. Bro? Friendly? Okay. At which she looked up to me with half-closed eyes and whispered in a voice strangely soft and womanish for her.
They must kill us. I wish they would kill us now.
I stroked her soft cheek gently and urged a less hopeless view. Even if the worst come, we may as well live as long as we can. Whereupon, to my surprise, she, having shot one quick glance into my eyes, put my arm away and drew her chair apart from mine. Her head was turned away from me, but I could not but notice that her bosom rose and fell swiftly. Presently she faced round again, lit a cigarette, put her hands in the pocket of her jacket and her feet on another chair, and said indifferently,
"You are right. Even if the worst must come, we may as well live as long as we can."
This sudden change in her manner surprised me. I knew I had no art in dealing with women, so I let it pass without comment, and looked out at the glassy sea. After some minutes of silence, the girl spoke to me again.
"Do you know anything of the actual plans of these maniacs?"
"No. I only know their preposterous purpose."
"Well, I know how it is to be done. Natalie was restless last night. You know that we share the same cabin, and she raved a bit. I kept her in her berth by sheer force, but I allowed her to talk."
This was serious. I drew my chair close to Miss Metford's and whispered, "For heaven's sake, speak now." Then I remembered Brand's power, and wrung my hands in helpless impotence. "You forget Brand. At this moment he is taking down every word we say."
"He's doing nothing of the sort."
"But you forget—"
"I don't forget. By accident, I put morphia in the tonic he takes, and he is now past telepathy for some hours at least. He's sound asleep. I suppose if I had not done it by accident, he would have known what I was doing, and so refused the medicine. Anyhow, accident or no accident, I have done it."
"Thank God!" I cried.
"And this precious disintegrating agent, they haven't it with them, it seems. To manufacture it in sufficient quantity would be impossible in any civilized country without fear of detection or interruption. Brand has the prescription, formula, what do you call it, and if you would get the paper and
throw it overboard—"
"Rubbish! They'd work it all out again."
"What then?" I whispered.
"Steal the paper, and wouldn't it do to put in an extra X or Y, or stick a couple of additional figures into any suitable vacancy? Don't you think they'd go on with the scheme and make a mess of it?"
"Miss Metford," I said, rising from my chair. "I mean, Metford. I know you like to be addressed as a man, or used to like it."
"Yes, I used to,"
she assented coldly. "I am going to take you in my arms and kiss you."
"I'm hanged if you are!"
she exclaimed, so sharply that I was suddenly abashed. My intended familiarity and its expression appeared grotesque, although a few minutes before she was so friendly. but I cannot waste precious time in studying a girl's caprices. So I asked at once, how can I get this paper?
I said steal it, if you recollect.
Her voice was now hard, almost harsh.
You can get it in Brand's cabin, if you are neither afraid nor jealous.
I am not much afraid, and I will try it. What do you mean by jealous?
I mean, would you, to save Natalie Brand, for they will certainly succeed in blowing themselves up, if nobody else, consent to her marrying another man? Say that young lunatic Hallie, who is always dangling after her when you are not?
Yes, I answered after some thought, for Hallie's attentions to Natalie had been so marked. The plainly inconsequent mention of him in this matter did not strike me. If that is necessary to save her, of course I would consent to it. Why do you ask? In my place, you would do the same.
No, I'd see the ship and all its precious passengers at the bottom of the sea first.
Ha ha! But you are not a man.
Right, and what's more, I'm glad of it.
Then, looking down at the rational part of her costume, she added sharply,
I shan't wear these things again.
All right. Well, that was a very awkward interaction. Let's be real. There are certain parts of this that haven't aged terribly well. At once, the author is depicting women as, strong and capable, independent and rational, but on the flip side, there's an undercurrent of that rationality being obscene. And it's just weird. That whole last interaction was like weaponized incompetence turning into the hope for things to come, and like, I don't know. Alright, I think we can probably get through one more chapter tonight. Let me see. Yeah, that should be fine. That'll probably be where we wrap up at this. So we'll get through chapter 15 here. Rocking him to the sharks. Have I mentioned that I don't like chapter titles that are spoilery? Back before we had the on-screen readers, I would shield the audience from some of these chapter titles, but now you suffer with me. At 1 o'clock in the morning, I arose, dressed hurriedly, drew on a pair of felt slippers, and put a revolver in my pocket. It was then time to put Edith Metford's proposal to the proof, and she would be waiting for me on the deck to hear whether I had succeeded in it. We had parted a couple of hours before on somewhat chilling terms. I had agreed to follow her suggestion, but I could not trouble my tired brain by guesses at the cause of her moods. It was very dark. There was only enough light to enable me to find my way along the corridor, off which the staterooms occupied by Brand and his immediate lieutenants opened. All the sleepers were restless from the terrible heat. As I stole along, a muffled word, a sigh, or a movement in the berths made me pause at every step with a beating heart. Having listened till all was quiet, I moved on again, noiselessly. I was almost at the end of the corridor. So intent had I been on preserving perfect silence that it did not sooner occur to me that I was searching for any special door. I had forgotten Brand's number. I could no more think of it than one can recall the name of a half-forgotten acquaintance suddenly encountered in the street. If I'd been 14, or 41, or 150, every number was as likely as it was unlikely. I tried vainly to concentrate my mind. The result was nothing. The missing number gave no clue. To enter the wrong room in that ship at that hour meant death for me. Of that I was certain. To leave the right room unentered gave away my first chance in the unequal battle with Brand. Then As I knew that my first chance would probably be my last, if not availed of, I turned to the nearest door and quietly tried the handle. The door was not locked. I entered the stateroom. "What do you want?" It was Hallie's voice that came from the berth. "Pardon me, a mistake. The heat, you know. Went on deck and blundered into your room." "Oh, all right. Who are you?" "Brand." "Good night. You did not blunder far." This sleepily. I went out and closed the door quietly. I had gained something. I was within one door of my destination, for I knew that Hallie was berthed between Rockingham and Brand. Hang on. Right. Here we go. For I knew that Hallie was berthed between Rockingham and Brand. But I did not know on which side Brand's room was, and I dared not ask. I tried the next door, going forward. I opened it like the other. It opened like the other. I went in. "Hello there." This time no sleepy or careless man challenged me. It was Rockingham's voice. "May I not enter my own room?" I whispered. "This is not your room. You are?" Rockingham sprang up at his berth, but before he could leave it, I was upon him. "I am Arthur Marcel, and this iron ring which I press against your left ear is the muzzle of my revolver. Speak, move, breathe above your natural breath, and your brains go through that porthole. Now, loose your hold of my arm and come with me." "You fool!" hissed Rockingham. "You dare not fire! No, you dare not!" He was about to call out, but my left hand closed on his throat, and a gurgling gasp was all that issued from him. I laid down the revolver and turned the ear of the strangling man close to my mouth. I had little time to think, but thought flies fast when such deadly peril menaces the thinker. As that which I must face if I failed to make terms with the man who was in my power. I knew that, notwithstanding his intensely disagreeable nature, if he gave his promise either by spoken word or equivalent sign, I could depend upon him. There were no liars in Brand society, but the word I could not trust him to say. I must have his sign. I whispered, "You know I do not wish to kill you. I shall never have another happy day if you force me to it. I have no choice. You must yield or die. If you will yield, and stand by me rather than against me in what shall follow, choose life by taking your right hand from my wrist and touching my left shoulder. I will not hurt you meanwhile. If you choose death, touch me with your left." The sweat stood on my forehead in big beads as I waited for his choice. It was soon made. He unlocked his left hand and placed it firmly on my right shoulder. He had chosen death. So the man was only a physical coward, or perhaps he had only made a choice of alternatives. I said slowly, and in great agony, "May God have mercy on your soul, and mine," on which the muscles in my left arm stiffened, the big biceps, an heirloom of my athletic days, thickened up, and I turned my eyes away from the dying face, half hidden by the darkness. His struggles were very terrible, but with my weight upon his lower limbs and my grasp upon his windpipe, that death throe was as silent as it was horrible. The end came slowly. I could not bear the horror of it longer. I must finish it and be done with it. I put my right arm under the man's shoulders and raised the upper part of his body from the berth. Then, a desperate wrench of my left arm, and there was a dull crack, like the snapping of a dry stick. It was over. Rockingham's neck was broken. Damn, okay. I wasn't expecting this, honestly. I wiped away the bloody froth that had oozed from the gaping mouth and tried to compose decently the contorted figure. I covered the face. Then I started on my last mission. For now I knew the door. I had bought the knowledge dearly. I meant to use it for my own purpose, careless of what violence might be necessary to accomplish my end. When I entered Brand's stateroom, I found the electric light full on. He was seated at a writing table with his head resting on his arms, which hung crosswise over the desk. The sleeper breathed so deeply it was evident that the effect of the morphia was still strong upon him. One hand clutched a folded parchment. His fingers clasped it nervelessly, and I had only to force them open one by one in order to withdraw the manuscript. As I did this, he moaned and moved in his chair. I had no fear of his awakening. My hand shook as I unfolded the parchment, which I unconsciously handled as carefully as though the thing itself were as deadly as the destruction which might be wrought by its direction. To me, the whole document was a mass of unintelligible formulae. My rusty university education could make nothing of it, but I could not waste time in trying to solve the puzzle, for I did not know what moment some other visitor might arrive to see how Brand fared. I first examined with a pocket microscope the ink of the manuscript. Then, making a scratch with Brand's pen on a page of my notebook, I compared the two. The colors were identical. It was the same ink. In several places where a narrow space had been left vacant, I put a 1 in front of the figures which followed. I had no reason for making this particular alteration, save that the figure 1 is more easily forged than any other, and the forgery is consequently more difficult to detect. My additions, when the ink was dry, could only have been discovered by one who was informed that the document had been tampered with. It was probable that a drawer, which stood open with the keys and the lock, was the place where Brand kept this paper, where he would look for it on awakening. I locked it in the drawer and put the keys into his pocket. There was something still to do with the sleeping man, whose brain compassed such marvelous powers. His telepathic faculty must be destroyed. I must keep him seriously ill without killing him. As long as he remained alive, his friends would never question his calculations, and the fiasco, which was possible under any circumstances, would then be assured. I had with me an Eastern drug, which I had bought from an Indian fakir once in Mirzapur. The man was an impostor whose tricks did not impose on me, but the drug, however he came by it, was reliable. It was a poison, which produced a mild form of cerebritis, that dulled but did not deaden the mental powers. It acted almost identically, whether administered subcutaneously, or, of course in a larger dose, internally. I brought it home with the intention of giving it to a friend who was interested in vivisection. I do not think that I myself would be the first and last to experiment with it. It served my purpose well. Alright, we've got ads about to start, and just a couple pages, so let's actually just screw it and hit snooze. We should be able to power through and ignore the ads. Where were we? The moment I pricked his skin, Brand moved in his seat. My hand was on his throat. He nestled his head down again upon his arms and drew a deep breath. He had moved again. Had he moved again, that breath would have been his last. I had been so wrought upon by what I had already done that night. I would have taken his life without the slightest hesitation, if the sacrifice seemed necessary. When my operation was over, I left the room and moved silently along the corridor, till I came to the ladder leading to the deck. Edith Metford was waiting for me, as we had arranged. She was shivering in spite of the awful heat. "Have you done it?" she whispered. "I have," I answered, without saying how much I had done. "Now you must retire, and rest easy. The formula won't work. I put both it and Brand himself out of gear." "Thank God," she gasped, and then sudden faintness came over her, It passed quickly, and as soon as she was sufficiently restored, I begged her to go below. She pleaded that she could not sleep, and asked me to remain with her upon the deck. It would be absurd to suppose that either of us could sleep this night, she very truly said, on which I was obliged to tell her plainly that she must go below. I had more to do. "Can I help?" she asked anxiously. "No. If you could, I would ask you, for you are a brave girl. I have something now to get through which is not woman's work."
"Your work is my work," she answered. "What is it?"
"I have to lower a body overboard without anyone observing me." There was no time for discussion, so I told her at once, knowing that she would not give way otherwise. She started at my words, but said firmly, "How will you do that unobserved by the watch? Go down and bring it up. I will keep the men employed." She went forward, and I turned again to the companion. When I got back to Rockingham's cabin, I took a sheet of paper and wrote, "Heat, mad," making no attempt to imitate his writing. I simply scrawled the words with a rough pen in the hope that they would pass as a message from a man who was hysterical when he wrote them. Then I turned to the berth and took up the body. It was not a pleasant thing to do, but it must be done. It was a long time reaching the deck, but the arms and legs swung to and fro, and I had to move cautiously, lest they should knock against the woodwork I had to pass. I got it safely up and hurried after it. Edith, I knew, would contrive to keep the men on watch and engaged until I had disposed of my burden. I picked up a coil of rope and made it fast to the dead man's neck. Taking one turn of rope round a boat davit, I pushed the thing over the rail. I intended to let go the rope the moment the weight attached to it was safely in the sea, and so lowered away silently, paying out the line without excessive strain, owing to the support of the davit around which I had wound it. Not to wait so long as that, for just as the body was dangling over the foaming water of the steamer, a little streak of moonlight shot out from behind a bank of cloud and lighted the vessel with a sudden gleam. I was startled by this, and held on, fearing that some watching eye might see my curious movements. For a minute, I leaned over the rail and watched the track of the steamer, as though I had come on deck through the air. There was a quick rush near the vessel's quarter. Something dark leaped out of the water, and there was a sharp snap. A crunch. The lower limbs were gone in the jaws of a shark. I let go of the rope in horror, and the body dropped splashing into that hideous fishing ground. Sick to death, I turned away. "Get below, quickly," Edith Metford said in my ear. "They heard the splash, slight as it was, and are coming this way." Her warning was nearly a sob. We hurried down the companion as fast as we dared, and listened to the comments of the watch above. They were soon satisfied that nothing of importance had occurred, and resumed their stations. Before we parted on that horrible night, Edith said in a trembling voice, "You have done your work like a brave man." "Say, rather, like a forger and a murderer," I answered. "No," she maintained. "Many men before you have done much worse in a good cause. You are not a forger. You are a diplomat. You are not a murderer. You are a hero." But I, being new to this work of slaughter and deception, could only deprecate her sympathy and draw away. I felt that my very presence near her was pollution. I was unclean, and I told her that I was so. Whereupon, without hesitation, she put her arms round my neck and said, clinging closely to me, "You are not unclean. You are free from guilt, and, Arthur, I will kiss you now." All right, that brings us to the end of chapter 14. Let's go ahead and set a bookmark here. And we can slide out of our reading nook. So, this has been a rather interesting second night for this book. Judging by where we are, a little bit more than half. We probably have 2 more sessions with this, which is about as expected. The developments and plot devices might be a little inane, shall we say? Fiction was a different beast 130 years ago or so. Just a little different. And let's be real, this was probably, if I'm being honest, it was mostly pulp fiction of the time. I don't imagine this being high literature, but you know what? Sometimes you just gotta grab a book from the grocery store shelf and make do with what you do. That all sort of passed out of commonplace, hasn't it? That was a lot more of a regular occurrence back when everyone had or didn't have phones or tablets or easy access to media. There weren't videos, there was no YouTube, so if you wanted an afternoon's entertainment while you're out or something to read at a gas station while you're waiting for something or other, you grabbed a cheap, bad book. Alright. Yep, back buying books at the newsstand. Yep. Nothing really, not a thing that much these days, but it is history. That's how it all started. Alright, guys. So, this has been our second reading from The Crack of Doom. We saw the nuke go off, and in all of its splendor, the imagination of an 1895 writer of what it would be like, how the world could end, and what sort of man was going to bring it about. Hey, how's it going? We are just finishing up, actually, for the night. Thanks for stopping in. But we have been reading Robert Cromie's The Crack of Doom. It's a sci-fi story written in 1895, so it's a little bit rough around the edges. Alright, let's take a look and see who is out there tonight that we might be able to raid into. If you're interested, we just read around here, so feel free to join us anytime you feel like dropping in by. Our next session is going to be on Tuesday night, where we will continue this, actually. We have a relatively stable schedule, so what is listed on Twitch for our frequency and schedule is accurate for the most part. So always welcome new friends to follow along in our readings. Alright, so let's see. Who is out there tonight? Preferably reading. I do prefer going into other readers whenever we can. Oh, is this guy? Oh, it's, let's see. Sundays are always kind of rough on finding people to go into. Let's be real. Ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-dum. Let's see, we raided into Cryptid just the other day. This guy's reading Jane Eyre. That could be good. All right. Yeah, I think that is what we'll do. Everybody else is writing from the looks of things. So, we're going to go over to... Where was it? I swear I saw it. Here we are. We're going to raid over to the old drunk guy. Funny how that works. So, I hope you give him our very best. And as always, thank you very much for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's reading of The Crack of Doom. And we'll be back on Tuesday for our continuation. Until then, thank you very much, and have a wonderful night.